Close your eyes for just a second. I mean, if you're listening to this on your commute or, washing the dishes or just sitting at your desk, I want you to drop whatever mental load you're carrying right now and step into a completely different sensory reality.
Yeah, just let it go for a minute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine you are walking through a bustling Tokyo train station. You hear that sharp, rhythmic beep-beep of commuter cards tapping against the turnstiles. You're navigating this absolute labyrinth of underground concrete corridors, just following a seemingly endless stream of commuters.
A very familiar feeling for anyone who's been there.
Right. And then you step onto an escalator, and as it carries you up toward the street level, the sliding glass doors part. Instantly, the harsh fluorescent lighting of the station is replaced by this crisp, sunlit spring morning. A warm breeze hits your face.
The best kind of spring morning.
And carrying on that breeze is an incredibly faint, sweet, almost earthy floral scent. It smells a bit like almonds and fresh rain. So you look up, probably expecting to see a claustrophobic sea of gray skyscrapers and tangled power lines.
Which is usually what you see in Tokyo.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, the sky is entirely obscured. You're standing beneath a breathtaking, fluffy, seemingly infinite canopy of pale pink. I mean, it stretches out as far as your eyes can even process.
It's just a total sensory shift.
It really is. And as you stand there on the pavement, completely mesmerized, you realize you're being swept into this gentle, flowing river of people, couples walking shoulder to shoulder, families carrying these intricately woven picnic baskets, corporate workers with loosened ties, millions of individual lives, all moving together with this shared, palpable sense of absolute awe.
It is a profoundly powerful image, and what's most fascinating is that this specific scene, this exact sensory overload, it only plays out for a very brief, incredibly intense window of time every single year in Japan.
Just a few days, really.
Yeah, it is a fleeting reality.
Which is precisely why we're taking you there today. We have this massive stack of sources sitting on the desk between us right now. We've pulled together botanical research papers, travel guides, deep dive cultural essays, historical Shinto texts, local Tokyo advice columns, and even convenience store food reviews.
A very eclectic mix.
Totally. But we aren't just going to read you some sterile list of facts or hand you a dry, bulleted travel itinerary. We are going to mentally transport you to Japan. Our mission for this deep dive is to take you on a full-day, highly immersive journey through Hanami.
That's the Japanese tradition of cherry blossom viewing, for those who might not know the term.
Right, Hanami. And we want you to experience it not as a distant tourist looking through the barrier of a camera lens, but, from the inside out. We're going to explore the sights, the sounds, the tastes, and the really profound philosophy behind what you're seeing.
And to achieve that level of immersion, we are adopting specific roles for our journey today. You will act as our proxy. You're the highly observant, deeply curious traveler stepping into this pink-hued world for the very first time. You are the eyes, the ears, and the instincts of our listener.
I am fully leaning into that, by the way. I want to notice every bizarre contradiction and every beautiful detail.
And my role will be the cultural guide. As you observe the physical environment, I'll interpret the underlying mechanisms. I'll decode the unspoken social rules, the botanical science, and the surprising historical architecture that built the things you're experiencing. Every abstract idea we discuss today is going to be firmly anchored to a physical, visible reality right in front of us.
I'm so ready. I'm taking a deep breath of that almond-scented spring air. I'm looking at this endless, glorious row of blooming trees, and I am stepping off the pavement to begin our day.
Welcome to Ueno Park.
Wow. The sheer scale of this is hard to process. Walking through the main entrance of Ueno Park, I'm looking down this famous central avenue, and it is lined with just an army of trees. There have to be over 1,000 of them.
Actually, there are roughly 1,200 planted along this specific pathway.
1,200 trees, and they are all erupting simultaneously in this pure pinkish-white cloud. There's a light breeze cutting through the morning air, and the petals are already starting to gently dust the paved walkways beneath our feet. But, looking up at the canopy, something is striking me as almost unnatural.
Really? What's catching your eye specifically?
The trees look engineered. They don't look like wild nature.
Engineered how?
Well, there's absolutely no green.
Yeah.
Like if you look at an apple tree or a peach tree in bloom back home, you see brown branches, green leaves, and the flowers are kind of mixed in, right?
Right, a mix of colors.
But here, there is no green breaking up the pink.
Yeah.
The branches are entirely wrapped in pure blossom. It creates this solid, unbroken cloud of color that feels almost aggressive in its perfection.
You have zeroed in on the exact botanical mechanism that makes Japanese cherry blossoms so visually overwhelming. What you're looking at is not a wild, naturally evolved forest.
I knew it.
Yeah, you're looking at a highly specific, cultivated variety of cherry tree called the Somei Yoshino. And your instinct that it looks engineered is entirely correct. It's a hybrid.
Wait, a hybrid created by modern botanists?
Created by farmers back in the Edo period, actually, around the 18th or 19th century, in a village called Somei, which is now part of modern-day Tokyo's Toshima district.
Okay, so hundreds of years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those farmers crossbred two different species of cherry trees to isolate genetic quirk where the flowers bloom entirely and completely before the tree's green leaves even begin to bud.
Wow.
Yeah, the tree pours 100% of its biological energy into the blossoms first.
So the leaves are delayed. That explains the total lack of green. But okay, let's unpack this. That still doesn't explain how all 1,200 trees in this park are blooming on the exact same day.
Right, the timing.
Yeah, even in a fruit orchard, you have early bloomers and late bloomers. Nature is messy.
This is where the story of the Somei Yoshino gets truly fascinating from a scientific perspective. They bloom at the exact same time because they are all the exact same tree.
Wait, you mean they're clones?
They are literal clones. The Somei Yoshino cannot reproduce on its own in the wild.
You're a kid.
Nope. If you plant a seed from a Somei Yoshino, it will not grow into a Somei Yoshino. It will revert to one of its parent species.
So how do they make more of them?
The only way to create a new Somei Yoshino tree is through grafting, taking a physical cutting from an existing tree and splicing it onto the rootstock of another, which means that virtually every single Somei Yoshino tree in Ueno Park, and indeed the millions planted across the entire country of Japan, share the exact same DNA.
That is mind-boggling. It's like a biological flash mob. Because they share the exact same genetic code, they react to the temperature and the sunlight in the exact same way.
Exactly.
They hit the identical biological trigger point simultaneously.
That is the perfect analogy. And because they act as a single biological organism responding to the weather, they create a meteorological phenomenon that just grips the entire nation.
A phenomenon that probably explains why there's so many people here today. Because I have to be honest, as much as I am marveling at the clone trees, the human element is just as staggering.
It's quite a crowd.
It is a sea of humanity. We are walking shoulder to shoulder. If I think about you listening right now, maybe you live in the US or Canada or Australia, when we want to enjoy nature, the entire goal is usually to escape the crowd, right?
Yeah, to find some peace and quiet.
Right. If I hike to a scenic overlook and find 2,000 people there, my instinct is to turn around and find a quieter trail. The crowd ruins the nature. But here, millions of people are flocking to the exact same spots at the exact same time. Why doesn't the sheer volume of people ruin the experience of the flowers?
To understand that, you have to bridge a massive cultural gap regarding how nature is consumed. In many Western cultures, nature is viewed as a sanctuary for individual solitude.
Exactly, getting away from it all.
But in Japan, the viewing of the cherry blossoms is a highly anticipated collective communal event. The crowd does not ruin the event. The crowd is the event. And this communal gathering is driven by the meteorological tracking of those cloned trees we just talked about. It's called the Sakura Zensen, the cherry blossom front.
The front, like a cold front or a storm front?
Precisely like a weather front. Because the Somei Yoshino trees are identical clones, they serve as perfect biological thermometers. As the weather warms up in the spring, the blooming starts down south in Okinawa, where it's subtropical.
Okay, makes sense.
Then, as the warm air pushes north, the bloom sweeps across the main islands, moving through Kyoto up to Tokyo, and finally reaching the northern island of Hokkaido weeks later.
So you can literally watch a wave of pink wash over a map of the country.
And people do watch it, obsessively. Starting in late winter, the nightly news programs, the meteorological agencies, and countless smartphone apps begin broadcasting detailed daily predictions of the Sakura Zensen.
Like checking the daily weather report.
Exactly. They track the first bloom dates and, crucially, the full bloom dates for every major city. People plan their vacations, corporate events, and family reunions around these highly specific meteorological forecasts.
The level of logistical coordination required for an entire society to mobilize based on when a flower opens is incredible. It implies a massive sense of urgency.
The urgency is the defining factor. The window of full bloom for the Somei Yoshino is brutally short. Once the flowers fully open, they are at their peak for perhaps a week, maybe 10 days if the weather is perfectly calm.
That's nothing.
It's very fast. One strong rainstorm or heavy gust of wind can strip the trees bare overnight. So when the news announces that Tokyo has reached full bloom, there's a collective unspoken mandate: drop everything and go to the park now, because it might be gone by Tuesday. The shared experience of rushing to witness this fleeting window of beauty together is the essence of Hanami.
That completely reframes the crowd for me. If you are walking with us right now and you feel bumped by the people around you, you really have to stop seeing them as obstacles. They are co-participants in a very brief, highly synchronized national festival.
Now, direct your attention away from the canopy for a moment and look down at the ground beneath the trees. The logistical challenge of millions of people wanting to sit under the same trees at the same time creates its own unique cultural landscape.
It certainly does. The contrast is actually jarring. I'm looking up at this delicate, ethereal, organic, pale pink canopy, and then I look down, and the ground is an absolute patchwork of neon blue plastic.
The ubiquitous blue tarps.
They are everywhere. Massive, cheap plastic sheets. The kind you might use to cover a leaking roof or protect a floor during painting. They are spread out over the dirt, the grass, the concrete borders. They are laid end to end, covering almost every square inch of usable ground beneath the branches.
It's quite a sight.
But here's the bizarre part. It's mid-morning. The park is full of people strolling. But when I look at these massive blue tarps, many of them are entirely empty, except for a single person sitting dead in the center.
Describe the person you're seeing.
It's almost comical. Right over there is a young man, probably in his early 20s. He is wearing a crisp, dark corporate business suit. He is sitting completely alone on a tarp that could easily seat 20 people. He has a laptop open, balanced on his knees, and he looks like he's been sitting in the cold dirt since dawn. He looks freezing, and he looks miserable. What is the sociological function of this lonely guy in a suit?
You are witnessing a sacred, somewhat grueling corporate duty known as bashitori.
Bashitori, spot reservation.
Spot reservation. Because the window for Hanami is so short and the desire to participate is so universal, securing prime real estate under a particularly beautiful blooming tree is a fiercely competitive sport. If a company plans to host an after-work Hanami party for its employees, they cannot simply show up at 6 p.m. and expect to find a spot.
They'd be wandering around for hours.
Exactly. The space must be claimed, physically and indisputably, hours in advance.
So they send a human placeholder.
They send the lowest person on the corporate totem pole. The solitary young men in suits you are seeing are almost always the newest recruits. The junior employees who were just hired in April. Which, by the way, coincides with the start of the Japanese fiscal year and, not coincidentally, the cherry blossom season.
Rough timing for the new guy.
Very. Their first major assignment for the company is often to wake up at 5 a.m., rush to Ueno Park armed with these massive blue tarps bought from a local convenience store, and physically guard the space until their senior managers and colleagues arrive 12 hours later.
That is an intense introduction to corporate hierarchy. He's a literal human traffic cone. But here's where it gets really interesting. Watching how people interact with these tarps, I am noticing a behavioral pattern that seems deeply out of place for a public park.
What pattern are you observing?
Over to our left, a group of people is arriving to join one of the tarps that was successfully guarded. But before they step onto the blue plastic, they are stopping entirely. They're unlacing their shoes, meticulously slipping them off, and lining them up neatly on the dirt right at the very edge of the plastic.
Right.
Only in their socks are they stepping onto the tarp to sit down. We are outside. This is a cheap sheet of industrial plastic sitting on public park dirt. Why are they applying indoor domestic rules to a piece of plastic?
Because in the context of Japanese cultural psychology, the moment that blue tarp is laid flat on the ground, a fundamental boundary is drawn. It ceases to be an outdoor space. The tarp manifests a temporary psychological indoor environment.
So it's like an invisible architectural floor plan on the dirt.
That is a very precise way to look at it. Japanese culture draws a very strong distinction between uchi, the inside, the home, the clean space, and soto, the outside, the public, the unclean space.
Uchi and soto.
Yes. Taking off your shoes at the genkan, which is the entryway of a home, is a deeply ingrained, non-negotiable cultural rule to prevent the dirt of the soto from contaminating the uchi. That psychological boundary does not evaporate just because you are in Ueno Park. The blue tarp is an extension of the living room.
That makes total sense.
You do not bring the dirt of the outside world onto the sanctuary where you will be sitting, eating, and relaxing with your group.
It definitely explains the profound level of cleanliness I'm seeing. If you treat the tarp as your living room, you treat the entire park with the respect of a shared domestic space.
And the etiquette extends far beyond footwear. There are rigid, unspoken rules governing how you construct and maintain this temporary living room. First is the spatial economy. While Bashitori is expected, sprawling out and claiming significantly more space than your group actually needs is considered a severe breach of social etiquette.
All right, don't be greedy.
Space is the ultimate premium in Tokyo, and hogging it when others are desperate to view the blossoms is deeply frowned upon.
Take what you need, leave the rest.
Furthermore, the waste management is handled with domestic precision. You do not simply toss an Enki beer can onto the grass. The trash sorting system is complex and mandatory.
I do notice that many of the tarps have multiple plastic bags set up at the corners, acting as makeshift sorting bins.
They are sorting combustible items like food scraps and paper wrappers, incombustible items like certain hard plastics, and then separating the PT bottles and aluminum cans. While major parks will set up massive temporary garbage stations during Hanami, the overarching cultural expectation is that you pack out whatever you packed in.
Leaving a mess would be a bad look.
Leaving a littered tarp behind would bring immense shame to the group, particularly a corporate group.
It's a very self-policing community. But I'm noticing one final detail about the architecture of these tarp setups. Because there is a breeze today, the tarps obviously need to be anchored, but no one is using metal tent pegs or stakes to pin the corners into the ground.
Very observant. What are they using?
Instead, they're weighing the corners down with heavy backpacks, or they've bought large 2-liter plastic water bottles specifically to act as paperweights for the tarp. Why not just use a simple tent peg? It would be so much easier.
You have just stumbled onto the most ironclad, non-negotiable rule of Hanami. A rule rooted entirely in the botanical fragility we discussed earlier. You never ever pierce the ground, and you never ever touch the trees.
Really? Not even to pull a branch down to get a better angle for a photo?
If you do that, you will likely be loudly reprimanded by a local. The Samei Yoshino cherry trees are incredibly delicate organisms. Their root systems do not drive deep into the earth. They grow very shallowly, spreading out like a web just beneath the surface of the soil.
So a peg would go right into the roots.
Precisely. Driving a metal peg into the ground to hold down a tarp could easily sever or severely damage the shallow roots, starving the tree of nutrients. That is why heavy water bottles are the mandated solution for anchoring.
The rule is literally designed around the biology of the root system.
And as for the branches, Japanese morning news broadcasts frequently run exasperated segments highlighting tourists who are oblivious to the rules, grabbing branches to pull them close for a selfie, or worse, shaking the trunk to force a shower of petals.
Which accelerates the end of the very thing they came to see.
It does. But beyond the physical breaking of the fragile wood, human hands carry oils, salts, and bacteria. The bark of the cherry tree is highly susceptible to infection. Touching the tree, climbing it, or snapping a twig can introduce rot that can literally kill a century-old tree.
Wow.
The cultural mandate is clear. Look, appreciate, revere, but keep your hands entirely to yourself. You are a guest in their space.
A guest who is getting remarkably hungry, by the way. Standing here analyzing the sociology of the tarps, I realize we haven't actually prepared our own space. Our imaginary junior executive is holding our spot, but before the rest of our group arrives for the afternoon party, we need to gather provisions.
A Hanami gathering without food and drink is merely a walk in the park. To truly participate, we need to engage with the culinary traditions of the season. Let's step away from the canopy and head to the streets.
All right, so we are walking just a few blocks away from the main entrance of Ueno Park. The noise of the crowd fades slightly, replaced by the hum of Tokyo street traffic. We approach a brightly lit, pristine storefront. The automatic glass doors slide open with a cheerful electronic chime. We're stepping into a Japanese convenience store, a konbini, and the sensory shift is immediate. The shelves are an absolute explosion of hyper-seasonal marketing.
It is the visual assault of pink, is it not?
Assault is the right word. Every single aisle seems to have been taken over by cherry blossom motifs. I'm looking at pink aluminum beer cans featuring intricate branch designs, pink foil packaging for potato chips, bottles of green tea with Sakura petals printed on the labels. It seems like every major brand in the country completely redesigns their packaging for a 3-week window.
The economic engine driven by the Sakura season is staggering. It is a multi-billion yen industry. But the phenomenon you are seeing on these shelves is not merely superficial marketing. It represents a much deeper culinary philosophy in Japan known as shun.
Shun. Does that mean seasonality?
It goes deeper than the 4 broad seasons we typically recognize in the West. Historically, Japan divided the year into 72 micro-seasons, each lasting just about 5 days, tracking the minute shifts in nature.
Wait, 72 microseasons.
Yes, tracking things like when specific insects emerge, when certain fish run, when a particular bud opens. Shun is the concept of consuming an ingredient at the absolute fleeting peak of its flavor and nutritional value within those micro-seasons. So when the konbini shells turn pink, it is a signal that the broader diet of the country is shifting.
That makes the convenience store feel less like a place for junk food and more like a barometer for the natural world. Let's act on that. I'm looking at the sources we compiled, specifically the local food guides, and I'm going to grab an assortment of items to take back to our tarp. I want you, the listener, to mentally case what we are grabbing right now. First, I'm pulling a package of thick-sliced, intensely savory smoked cheese. Next, a triangular plastic pack of perfectly chilled, lightly salted edamame.
Excellent foundational choices for a drinking party.
And then I'm walking over to the fresh sweet section. I have to grab this because it looks entirely alien to me. It is a small, pale pink, slightly lumpy ball of sweet rice, but the entire thing is wrapped in a dark, wet, pickled green leaf.
You have found the absolute quintessential taste of a Japanese spring. This is something you can actually experience if you visit. That is Sakura mochi.
Sakura mochi. Okay, if you're listening and trying to picture this, it looks like a delicate pink dessert wearing a wet, leafy raincoat. My immediate instinct as a Westerner is to peel the leaf off and throw it away before eating the sweet part inside.
If you did that, you would be discarding the entire architectural genius of the dish. You absolutely must eat the leaf.
But eating a tree leaf just feels counterintuitive. What is the mechanism behind this flavor profile? Why wrap it in a leaf?
Well, the pink exterior is made from glutinous rice that has been dyed pale pink and pounded until it is sticky and chewy. Inside that rice is a dense, intensely sweet paste made from adzuki red beans, known as anko. If you just ate the rice and the bean paste, it would be overwhelmingly, cloyingly sweet.
Right, a total one-note sugar bomb.
Exactly. The leaf is the counterbalance. It is an actual cherry blossom leaf, often harvested months prior from a specific variety called the Oshima cherry that has been preserved in a harsh salt brine. When you bite into the Sakura mochi, your teeth first break through the tough, fibrous, intensely salty pickled leaf. That sharp salinity immediately cuts through the heavy sweetness of the red bean paste, creating a perfectly balanced tension on the palate.
Oh, so the salt amplifies the sweet like a salted caramel.
More than that. The pickling process breaks down the cellular structure of the leaf and releases a chemical compound called coumarin. Coumarin is what produces that faint, sweet almond and rain scent you smelled when you first stepped out of the train station. By wrapping the rice in the pickled leaf, the sweet absorbs that chemical compound. You are literally ingesting the aroma of the cherry blossom.
That is brilliant culinary engineering. The food is simulating the environment.
It is the embodiment of shun, and it is joined by other hyper-seasonal items you might see around the store. Tender bamboo shoots that offer a mild, earthy crunch, spring cabbage, which is far sweeter and softer than winter cabbage, and Japanese strawberries, which are cultivated to reach peak sugar content right as the weather warms. Eating these specific foods while sitting under the cherry trees is a method of completely immersing all 5 of your senses in the season. You aren't just looking at spring, you are physically consuming it.
I am sold. Our plastic baskets are full of pink beer cans, savory smoked cheese, and salty sweet Sakura mochi. We pay the cashier, the automatic doors chime again, and we step back out onto the street to head back to the park. And immediately, whoa, a violent sharp wind just whipped down the street and bit right through my light spring jacket. I am suddenly shivering.
You have just encountered the meteorological reality of Hanami.
Hanami, the translation for that has to be something about freezing to death in a spring jacket.
It translates roughly to the spring chill or the cherry blossoms cold.
It feels incredibly deceptive. The visual environment, bright blue sky, the shining sun, the soft pink flowers, it's signaling to my brain that it is a warm, balmy spring day. But the thermometer feels like it just dropped 15 degrees in 5 minutes.
It is the classic trap that catches almost every first-time visitor. The blooming of the cherry blossoms in late March and early April coincides with a highly unstable period in Japan's weather patterns. High-pressure systems from the Asian continent frequently clash with warmer southern air. The result is that while the daytime might reach a pleasant 65 degrees Fahrenheit in the sun, the moment the sun dips behind a building or a wind kicks up or evening approaches, the temperature plummets rapidly.
So if you are planning to sit perfectly still on a plastic tarp on the cold dirt for 4 hours,
You must prepare for winter. If you look closely at the seasoned locals walking past us back toward the park, you will notice a stark contrast to their spring-themed picnic baskets. They are carrying thick, down winter coats. They have heavy wool blankets stuffed into their tote bags, and crucially, they are carrying boxes of Cairo.
Cairo, are those the disposable chemical heat packs?
Yes, they are small packets containing iron powder, water, and salt. When exposed to oxygen, an exothermic reaction occurs, generating heat for up to 12 hours. Locals will stick these heat packs to their lower backs, stuff them into their pockets, and place them in their shoes. Surviving the Hanami chill is a prerequisite for enjoying the Hanami party.
Practical tip for you listening. Do not let the pastel pink aesthetics fool you into wearing shorts. Layer up like you are going to a late autumn football game.
We are adequately layered. Our provisions are secured. Let us navigate back to our blue tarp.
All right, we walk back into Ueno Park, and the atmosphere has fundamentally shifted. It is now mid-afternoon. The leisurely morning strolls have been replaced by this dense kinetic energy. Every single square inch of blue tarp is now occupied. The solitary junior executives have been relieved of their guard duty. They're now joined by their entire offices. The Hanami party is in full swing.
Scan the environment. What demographic breakdown are you observing?
It is an incredible mosaic of Japanese society, all packed into one shared space. And on the tarp immediately to our right, there is a massive corporate group. There must be 40 men and women in suits. But the rigid corporate posture is gone. The ties are loosened, the suit jackets are folded away, and they are enthusiastically passing around massive 1.8-liter glass bottles of sake. They're laughing loudly, eating the thick-cut bacon and smoked cheese from the konbini.
A classic corporate bonding event.
Then, right next to them on the adjoining tarp, the vibe is entirely different. It's a young family. A toddler is wobbling around on the blue plastic, laughing and trying to catch a stray pink petal out of the air, while the grandparents drink green tea from a thermos. And just beyond them, a tight circle of college students in trendy streetwear, eating the Sakura mochi and taking rapid-fire photos for social media.
All overlapping, all sharing the same auditory and physical space.
But this brings me to a massive behavioral contradiction that I cannot figure out. I'm looking at thousands of adults. A vast majority of them are actively consuming alcohol. There are empty beer cans and sake cups littered across every tarp. We're in the middle of a massive public park, and functionally, this is a giant outdoor drinking festival.
That is an accurate assessment?
Yet, the environment is not chaotic.
Yeah.
There is no one screaming aggressively at the top of their lungs. I don't see brawls breaking out. There are no booming Bluetooth speakers dominating the space and forcing everyone else to listen to their music. It is loud, yes. There's a constant dull roar of thousands of overlapping conversations, but the noise is incredibly contained. If you put 5,000 people in a public park in the US or the UK, gave them unlimited alcohol and told them to party, the result would likely be lawlessness. How is this level of public order maintained in the middle of a massive alcohol-fueled gathering?
You are observing the real-time application of a fundamental pillar of Japanese sociology. It is a concept deeply wired into the cultural operating system, known as kuki wo yomu.
Kuki wo yomu. What is the literal translation?
It translates directly to reading the air.
Reading the air, like the English phrase, reading the room.
Similar in concept, but significantly more profound in execution. Reading the room usually implies adjusting your behavior so people don't get annoyed with you. Reading the air implies an instinctual, hyper-vigilant awareness of your surroundings and the impact your existence has on the collective harmony. During Hanami, public drinking is not just tolerated, it is expected. Letting off steam with your coworkers, breaking down the rigid, hierarchical barriers of the office oversight is a crucial social function. But Kuki wo Yomu dictates that your individual or group joy must never become a burden to the group next to you.
It is almost as if each group has erected an invisible, sociological soundproof dome over their blue tarp. The cultural rule acts as the acoustic foam. You can drink, laugh, and be merry inside your specific dome, but you are hyper-aware of making sure your noise and your mess do not leak out and pierce the dome of the family sitting 2 feet away from you.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it, the invisible dome. And the policing of that dome is internal. If an employee in the corporate group has one too many cups of sake and starts getting too loud, you will not see a stranger from another tarp come over to complain. Instead, a senior member of their own group will immediately shush them or gently pull them back down to the tarp. The group polices itself to ensure the broader harmony of the park is maintained.
It is a staggering contrast to Western individualism, where the assumption is often that my right to have a good time supersedes your right to peace and quiet. I mean, in many Western countries, drinking in public parks is heavily restricted or outright illegal, precisely because the societal assumption is that public drinking inevitably leads to public disorder. The air isn't red, the air is usually shattered by whoever brought the loudest speaker.
Here, the freedom to drink in public is preserved entirely by the collective commitment to respecting the air. However, it is important to note that if this environment, the dull roar, the sea of blue tarps, the corporate sake drinking, is not the experience you want, Tokyo offers entirely different mechanisms for viewing the blossoms. Ueno Park is the festival. But if you want a different dome, you go to a place like Shinjuku-gyoen.
Shinjuku-gyoen.
Yeah.
How does the environment there differ from what we are seeing in Ueno?
Night and day. Shinjuku-gyoen is another massive park in the heart of Tokyo, but its historical roots are different. It was originally a botanical garden for the imperial family before becoming a national park. Because of that pedigree, it is heavily regulated. At Shinjuku-gyoen, alcohol is strictly, unequivocally banned. They have guards at the entrance gates who will actively search your bags to ensure you are not smuggling in beer or sake. They also ban all musical instruments and sports equipment.
Bag checks for booze at a park gate, that completely shifts the demographic.
It filters the experience. Without the alcohol and the massive corporate after-work parties, Shinjuku-gyoen offers a serene, hushed, highly contemplative viewing experience. You will see people quietly reading books under the trees, artists painting watercolors, and families having peaceful picnics without the threat of a rowdy group next to them.
So if you are planning a trip, you have to read your own air. If you want the loud, joyous, chaotic energy of the human mosaic, you go to Ueno. If you want quiet contemplation and a perfectly curated garden aesthetic, you go to Shinjuku-gyoen.
Exactly. The tradition bends to accommodate different psychological needs.
Well, sitting here on our tarp in Ueno, watching the corporate workers get slightly red-faced from the sake, my gaze is drifting. I'm looking away from the dense, loud center of the tarp cities, out toward the quieter edges of the park, the paved walkways, and the isolated wooden benches. And I'm observing a completely different kind of human interaction playing out under the branches, something much more intimate.
What is catching your attention on the periphery?
There is a couple sitting on a wooden bench beneath a profoundly unique tree. It doesn't look like the fluffy Someyoshino clones. Its branches are not reaching up toward the sky. Instead, they are cascading downward, sweeping toward the ground like a willow tree, but completely covered in vibrant pink blossoms.
You have spotted a Shidara Sakura, the weeping cherry tree. They are often much older than the Someyoshino, sometimes living for centuries, and they carry a majestic, almost melancholic posture.
It frames the bench like a private curtain, and the couple sitting under it is fascinating me. If you think about couples in a romantic setting in a Western city, say under the Eiffel Tower or in Central Park, you expect grand physical gestures, holding hands, leaning into each other, kissing. But this couple is sitting perhaps 6 inches apart. They are not touching. They are sharing a beautifully arranged benten box, passing it back and forth. And every few seconds, one of them will steal a very quick sideways glance at the other, offer a small smile, and then immediately look back up at the cascading flowers. The romantic tension is palpable. It is thick in the air, but the expression of it is incredibly indirect.
You are observing how public calmness often masks intense private emotions in Japan. And you are likely witnessing a very specific high-stakes moment in Japanese dating culture.
It feels like they are on the precipice of something.
They are likely navigating the cultural mechanism of kokuhaku.
Kokuhaku, what does that translate to?
It translates to the confession, specifically the love confession. To understand the weight of this moment, think about how dating works in many Western cultures. It is often defined by ambiguity. Two people might hang out, go to a movie, grab drinks, they might hold hands or kiss. And then, usually after weeks or months of physical and emotional escalation, one person suffers the anxiety of initiating the whole "what are we" conversation to define the relationship.
The dreaded, anxiety-inducing purgatory of modern dating, where nobody knows where they stand.
Precisely. In Japan, that timeline is frequently reversed. The ambiguity is resolved up front, often before any physical intimacy occurs, through the kokuhaku. It is a formal, explicit, verbal confession of feelings. One person will look at the other and say, "I like you, please date me," or "please go out with me."
That is radically direct.
Yeah.
You lay all your emotional cards on the table before the game even really begins.
It acts as an absolute psychological switch. Before the kokohaku, you are friends or colleagues or acquaintances. You generally do not hold hands, you do not engage in public displays of affection. But the moment the confession is made and the moment it is accepted, the switch is flipped. You transition instantly into an official relationship. The boundaries are clear.
That explains the tension on the bench. If they haven't flipped the switch yet, they're sitting in that highly charged space just before the confession. And what better place to do it than under a weeping cherry tree? The flowers are beautiful, and by the way, I am in love with you.
The setting is not coincidental. The blooming cherry blossoms provide the ultimate emotionally loaded backdrop for this vulnerability. The fleeting nature of the flowers mirrors the terrifying, fragile leap of faith required to confess your feelings. This connection between the cherry blossom and the intense, fragile emotions of love is deeply lasted across modern Japanese pop culture.
Does it show up in the media a lot?
If you turn on a radio in Japan during spring, you will hear the word sakura constantly in J-pop music. Artists like Aiko, with her massive hit Sakura no Toki Time of Cherry Blossoms, or Utada Hikaru's iconic track Sakura Drops. In Japanese songwriting, the cherry blossom is the ultimate lyrical metaphor. Sometimes it represents the intoxicating, beautiful, but delicate beginning of a new romance, a bud opening. Other times, the falling petals represent the painful beauty of a breakup, the tears falling like pink snow. The flower is capable of encapsulating the entire emotional spectrum of human connection.
Watching this couple, knowing that context, makes the scene feel incredibly cinematic. It's not just a nice view. They are sitting on a culturally loaded stage, participating in a ritual that is echoed in the songs they listen to and the history they share.
And just as the tension on that bench reaches its peak, the environment around them is about to fundamentally change. Look at the horizon.
The sun is getting low. The harsh midday light is softening into long golden shadows that are cutting across their blue tarps. And suddenly, a strong, sustained gust of wind sweeps off the pond and rushes through the central avenue of the park.
Watch the canopy. Here it comes.
The wind hits the branches of the 1,200 Somi Yoshino trees above us. And because they are past their peak bloom, the wind knocks thousands, maybe tens of thousands of loose petals free from the stems simultaneously. They swirl through the golden air. It literally looks like a blizzard of pink snow violently swirling around the trunks of the trees.
You are witnessing Sakura Fubuki, the cherry blossom blizzard.
The reaction from the crowd is instantaneous. The low roar of conversation stops. Across the sea of blue tarps, people are collectively gasping. The corporate businessmen, the college students, the young families, they're all standing up, reaching their hands into the air, trying to catch the individual petals as they fall toward the dirt. It is breathtakingly beautiful.
It is the absolute climax of the Hanami experience, but pay attention to the emotion it evokes in you right now.
Standing here, watching pink snow fall around us, I am feeling a sudden, unexpected pang of deep nostalgia. It is stunning, yes, but it's also inherently tragic. I mean, think about the buildup we just discussed. The entire nation tracks the weather. The junior executives freeze in the mud to save a spot. They buy the specific foods, and then, almost the exact second the flowers achieve absolute perfection, they begin to die. The wind tears them apart and scatters them in the dirt. Why base your biggest, most joyful national celebration on something so fundamentally sad? Why celebrate death?
If we pull back the lens and look at the broader philosophical architecture of Japan, you have just touched the very core of the Japanese aesthetic soul. That beautiful sadness you're feeling, that ache in your chest watching the petals fall, is the physical manifestation of a concept called mono no aware.
Mono no aware. What is the translation of that?
It is difficult to translate directly into English, but it roughly means the pathos of things, or a profound, empathetic appreciation of impermanence. It is the deep awareness that absolutely everything in the physical world, every beautiful moment, every youth, every relationship, every life, is entirely transient. Nothing lasts. But mono no aware dictates that rather than despairing over this fact, or trying to build stone monuments to defy time, we should find a heightened, poignant beauty in that very transience.
The sunset effect. A sunset is only beautiful because the sun is actively disappearing. If the sky looked like a sunset 24 hours a day, we would never take photos of it. The beauty exists because it is dying.
Precisely. If cherry blossoms were made of plastic, or if they were evergreen flowers that stayed perfectly pink on the branches 365 days a year, they would be visually pleasant. But they would become background noise. No one would write poetry about them. No one would sit in the cold to look at them. It is the very fact that they vanish so spectacularly and so quickly that demands our absolute, undivided attention and reverence.
That is a heavy, profound philosophy to attach to a flower. How far back in Japanese history does this connection go?
Over 1,000 years. To understand how the cherry blossom became the avatar for this philosophy, we have to look back to the Heian period, which spanned roughly the 8th to the 12th centuries. During the early part of this era, the Japanese nobility, who were heavily influenced by Chinese culture, actually favored the plum blossom. Plum blossoms bloom earlier in the winter. They possess a strong, wonderful fragrance, and they are beautiful.
So what caused the shift from the plum to the cherry?
The mechanics of how the flower dies. The plum blossom is resilient. When a plum blossom finishes its bloom, it slowly withers and browns while still attached to the branch. It clings to life. The native cherry blossom, particularly as it was cultivated later, does the exact opposite. It does not wither. It detaches from the branch while it is still perfectly pink, intact, and at the absolute height of its visual glory. It shatters in a spectacular flurry of petals. For the Heian nobility, who were obsessed with writing poetry about the fleeting, fragile nature of life, the shattering cherry blossom became the perfect, undeniable physical metaphor for mono nowhere.
It is nature acting out the philosophy in real time.
Exactly. And as Japanese history progressed from the courtly nobility to the era of the warriors, this imagery evolved and hardened. It was adopted by the samurai class.
The samurai, the military warriors, adopted a delicate pink flower.
It was central to their identity. The samurai ethos, the code of Bushido, was deeply intertwined with the mechanics of the falling cherry petal. For a samurai, the ideal existence was not a long, slow decline into old age. The ideal was to live a bright, brilliant, honorable life, and when the moment of battle or duty arrived, to drop life cleanly, gracefully, and without hesitation. You do not cling desperately to a withering existence. You fall at the height of your prime. There is a famous historical proverb, among flowers, the cherry blossom, among men, the samurai.
That completely changes the context of the falling petals. It is a beautiful thought, but it is incredibly dark. It associates the flower directly with the aesthetics of death.
It does, and tragically in the 20th century, that deeply ingrained cultural imagery was weaponized. During World War II, the Japanese militarist government actively co-opted the symbol of the falling cherry blossom as an instrument of state propaganda to glorify sacrifice.
In what way? How do they use it?
They manipulated the samurai aesthetic of the falling petal to convince an entire generation of young men to give up their lives. The kamikaze pilots, the young aviators sent on suicide missions, literally painted cherry blossoms on the sides of their aircraft. They took branches of cherry blossoms with them into the cockpits. The state poetry and propaganda told these young men and their grieving families that they were not dying in vain. They were falling like beautiful cherry petals for the emperor, and they would be reincarnated as blossoms at the Yasukuni shrine.
That is devastating. The government hijacked a 1,000-year-old philosophical meditation on beauty and turned it into a mechanism for mass death. The psychological weight that this little pink flower carries is almost unbearable. It holds the poetry of the ancient courts, the stoic code of the warriors, and the immense trauma of a modern world war, all inside a petal that weighs less than a gram.
It is the ultimate cultural vessel. When Japanese people sit on these blue tarps under the Sakura Fubuki, watching the petals fall into their sake cups, they are not just looking at a pretty weather phenomenon. Consciously or subconsciously, they are participating in a millennium-old meditation on life, death, and national identity. The party is a celebration of life, thrown in the shadow of its inevitable end.
I will never look at a falling leaf, or a flower, or a changing season the same way again. That fundamentally alters the experience of standing here in the wind. Well, as the last of the petals from that gust of wind settle onto our blue tarp, the sun finally dips completely below the skyline. The golden hour fades. The sky turns from a bruised orange to a deep indigo, and finally to pitch black. The air temperature drops sharply, but the park does not empty out. Instead, a new set of mechanics kicks in. The environment transforms yet again.
The day is far from over. As the sun sets, we transition from Hanami to the realm of Yozakura.
Yozakura, night viewing. To experience this, we have packed up our tarp in Ueno and walked through the Tokyo evening to another famous location highlighted in our source material, the Chidorigafuchi Moat, which surrounds the former Edo castle, now the Imperial Palace. And the visual shift is staggering. It is ethereal. It feels almost ghostly.
Detail the visual mechanics of the scene for the listener.
The moat is a long, winding body of dark water. Along the banks, massive ancient cherry trees reach their branches out over the water. and strung up through the branches are hundreds of beautiful, glowing paper lanterns. Giant spotlights are pointed up from the ground, illuminating the pale pink blossoms against the stark, pitch-black night sky. The contrast makes the flowers look almost neon, radiating a soft, glowing light. And down on the black water of the moat, couples have rented small wooden rowboats. They are gently paddling through the dark, but the surface of the water isn't black. It is completely covered in a thick, solid layer of fallen pink petals. The wooden boats are literally cutting a path through a glowing carpet of flowers.
That floating carpet of petals possesses its own specific terminology. It is called hanaikata, which translates to the floral raft.
Hanaikata, a floral raft. The poetry is baked into the very vocabulary of the language, but the energy here is entirely different from the afternoon. We have moved from the loud, festive, slightly chaotic picnic on the blue tarps to something hushed, mysterious, and deeply reverent. It feels spiritual.
Your instinct to use the word spiritual is historically accurate, because while we have discussed the poetry, the samurai, and the corporate bonding, the absolute taproot of this entire tradition goes deeper than all of those. It connects directly to Japan's indigenous animistic religion, Shinto.
Animism, the belief that spirits inhabit nature.
Yes. Let us examine the etymology of the word sakura itself. According to ancient Japanese folklore and linguistic theories, the word is composed of two parts. The syllable sa referred to the deity of the rice paddies, the mountain god who controlled the agricultural harvest and the lifeblood of the village. The syllable kura meant a seat or a saddle.
So Sakura translates to the seat of the mountain god.
Exactly. Ancient agrarian communities believed that during the harsh winters, the gods resided high up in the mountains. But in the spring, as the earth warmed, those gods descended into the valleys to bless the fields. The farmers believed that the blooming of the cherry blossoms was the physical sign that the mountain god had arrived and taken a temporary seat within the tree.
So when they gathered under the branches, they weren't just throwing a spring picnic, it was a religious communion.
The original iteration of Hanami was a vital agricultural ritual. The farmers would gather under the blooming trees, lay out offerings of food and drink sake, believing they were literally sharing a meal with the deity residing in the blossoms above them. They drank to entertain the god, praying for a bountiful rice harvest in the coming autumn. The reverence you see today, the strict rule against touching the bark, the instinct to not disturb the tree, stems from the ancient belief that you are sitting in a temporary temple.
That makes perfect sense. The trees aren't just plants, they are vessels.
And in some parts of the country, they are not just temporary vessels, they are recognized as permanent, sacred entities. If you travel outside the hyper-urban center of Tokyo and go into the countryside, you will occasionally find massive, ancient cherry trees with thick ropes tied around their trunks.
I've seen pictures of those ropes on trees near shrines. What are they called?
They are called shimenawa. They are thick ropes twisted from rice straw, often decorated with zigzagging strips of white paper called shide. In Shinto tradition, a shimenawa acts as a spiritual boundary. When it is tied around a rock or a waterfall or a tree, it denotes that the object is a yorishiro, a physical object capable of attracting and housing a kami, a divine spirit. To harm a tree marked with a shimenawa is to invite spiritual disaster.
He demands absolute respect.
But the reverence isn't merely about fear of the gods. The trees themselves are worshipped as physical embodiments of an unstoppable, fierce life force. We look at the delicate pink petals and think of fragility, but the biological organism producing those petals is incredibly powerful.
How so? We talked about how fragile the roots are.
The roots are shallow, but their persistent power is immense. There is perhaps no better physical demonstration of this duality than a famous tree located in northern Japan, in the city of Morioka. It is an almost 400-year-old cherry tree, known as the Ishiwari Sakura.
Ishiwari Sakura, what does that translate to?
The stone-splitting cherry tree?
Stone splitting, like the roots cracked a paving stone.
Far more dramatic than that. Centuries ago, a seed from an Ito Higan cherry tree somehow lodged itself into a microscopic hairline crack in a massive, solid granite boulder. As the tree germinated and grew, the cellular expansion of its trunk and root system exerted a slow, microscopic, but relentless hydraulic pressure against the stone. Over hundreds of years, the delicate biological tissue of the tree exerted such immense force that it literally split the massive granite boulder cleanly in half.
A tree that produces flowers so fragile that a breath of wind can destroy them possesses the internal mechanical force to shatter solid granite.
Yes. Today, the massive trunk of the Ishiwari Sakura grows directly up through the center of the cleft rock. It is a profound natural monument. It perfectly encapsulates the ultimate contradiction of the cherry blossom and perhaps the Japanese spirit itself. An organism so delicate and ephemeral that its beauty only lasts a week, yet possessing a quiet, unstoppable, ancient strength capable of breaking solid stone.
That visual is staggering. Standing here on the banks of the Chitorogafuchi moat, looking at these illuminated trees reflecting in the dark water, I am trying to synthesize everything we have witnessed today. We started with the sheer biological scale of 1,200 cloned trees. We navigated the complex, invisible architecture of the blue tarps and the silent corporate guards. We tasted the chemical compound of the flower and the sakura mochi. We watched the silent, high-stakes romance of the kokohaku confession under the weeping branches. We confronted the heavy, philosophical weight of the kamikaze pilots and mono-one aware as the petals fell like snow. And now, we're looking at the ancient seats of mountain gods. It is an overwhelming amount of meaning to pack into a single, pale pink flower.
The cherry blossom is the lens through which you can view the entire architecture of the Japanese soul. To understand the flower is to understand the culture.
Well, as we stand here, the Hanami chill has finally penetrated my layers completely. The cold wind sweeping off the moat is biting. It is time for us to head home.
It has been a comprehensive and exhausting day.
We turn away from the glowing lanterns of the moat and begin walking slowly back toward the bright modern lights of the Tokyo train station. The crowds are finally starting to thin out, the trains carrying the corporate workers and the families back to their respective homes. The ethereal glow of the Yozakura fades behind us. And as we step back onto the escalator to descend into the concrete corridors of the transit system, you happen to look down at your shoe. And right there, stuck to the wet canvas of your sneaker, is a single, perfect, pale pink petal.
A physical artifact of a fleeting moment.
It has been an incredible journey today. We set out to take you past the tourist brochures and deep into the mechanisms of a Japanese spring. I feel like we have successfully bridged that cultural gap, explaining not just what happens under the trees, but exactly how and why it happens.
It is a lot of cultural, historical, and biological information to process. But as we prepare to leave you at the station, I want to offer one final philosophical reflection. Something for you to carry with you as you go about your day, wherever in the world you're listening to this deep dive.
What is the final thought?
Today, we explored the concept of mono no aware, the idea that the cherry blossom is celebrated intensely because it falls. As you walk away from this experience, you realize that true beauty, the kind of beauty that moves millions of people to gather in the cold, is not about permanence. It is not about preservation. It is about total presence. Imagine if those pale pink blossoms stayed perfectly preserved on the branches all year long, day after day, month after month. Would we ever stop our busy lives to look up at them? Would young executives freeze on a tarp to save a spot? Would families gather underneath them? Almost certainly not. If they were permanent, they would become invisible. They would just be background noise. It is the very fleeting nature of the flower that demands our absolute undivided attention. It forces us to exist entirely in the present moment because the present moment is all that flower has. And so it forces you to look at your own life and ask yourself a difficult question. What in your own life is incredibly beautiful precisely because you know it will not last?
That is a profound question to sit with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today. We hope we have left you completely immersed in the sounds, the sights, and the soul of a Japanese spring. We will see you next time.